October 3rd, 2025. NASA's Perseverance rover on Mars captured images of 3 Atlas. Not the clearest shot, but something. An astrophotographer named Simeon Schmaus stacked 20 of those rover images, and there it was. A faint smudge of light exactly where the interstellar visitor should be. People are talking about it, analyzing it, debating what it shows. But here is what is strange. That same day, NASA furled 15,000 employees.
The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's high-rise camera, capable of 30 times better resolution than what Perseverance captured, was positioned perfectly for the shot of a lifetime. ESA's Mars Express and ExoMars were watching too. Where are those images? And it gets stranger. Remote viewers detected technology aboard this object back in August. A thumb drive-sized device deliberately placed inside an ancient Comet broadcasting impulses.
They described this months before the telescope started detecting the chemical impossibilities. This is a 2-part video. First half covers 3I Atlas and everything new. Second half is general space news from this week. Timestamps in the description if you want to jump ahead. Before we dive deeper, if you find this fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe. Just tell me in the comments where you are listening from, what time it is there, and what you think this object really is. Natural, Comet, or something more. Want to help our community grow? Share this on X, Facebook, Reddit, or your messenger. Thank you for always having our back. Chapter 1. The Cylinder in the Martian Sky. Let me show you something that 3. I divided by Atlas News and Rumors. Appeared on Twitter 48 hours ago that changed everything. A user called UFO Mania posted an image with a caption that sent shockwaves through the online astronomy community. The newest and closest of 3 Atlas, as it passes, is not a comet. Is perfectly cylindrical. The post included what appeared to be an elongated object captured during the Mars flyby, and within hours it had been shared thousands of times. Now, before you dismiss this as just another internet conspiracy, understand this was not some blurry photograph from someone's backyard telescope. The coordinates matched, the timing matched, and most importantly, the silence from official channels matched. Because here is what nobody is talking about. On October 3rd, when 3-2 Atlas made its closest approach to Mars at 29 million kilometers, we should have been flooded with images. The high-resolution imaging experiment camera aboard NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter was positioned perfectly. The European Space Eye's Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter had their instruments trained on the exact location. Multiple spacecraft, multiple angles, the best resolution ever achieved of an interstellar object. And we got nothing. Well, not nothing. We got silence. But into that silence stepped voices that could not be ignored. An account called 3I Atlas Anomaly began posting a technical breakdown that was far more detailed than typical. 10 specific points, each citing actual observations. Carbon dioxide-rich coma revealed by JWST. Water and hydroxyl emission detected by SWIFT. Polarimetric oddities showing negative 2.77% polarization at phase angle 7 degrees. A combination unprecedented among asteroids and comets. Think about that for a moment. This was not vague speculation. These were citing real instruments, real measurements, real scientific papers. Then came the cosmologist, a Twitter user named Moneypenny, who identifies as a plasma phenomena expert and former BBC journalist, posted something that made even skeptics pause. She claimed a leading cosmologist named Stephen Burns believes the object is intelligent, surrounded by dusty plasma, and exhibiting consciousness which has already been communicating with us and with other planets. Consciousness, communicating. Now, you might think this sounds like fringe territory, and perhaps it is. But here is where it gets interesting. This was not posted in some dark corner of the internet. This was in plain sight, with Moneypenny's credentials attached, her background in investigative journalism on display. And she added one more detail that sent a chill through anyone paying attention. We can no longer look at it as it is too close to the Sunday, so It will now be December before we are able to view it again. December, 3 months of waiting. 3 months while the object is hidden behind the sun, completely obscured from every telescope on Earth. And during those 3 months, if the trajectory changes, we would not know until it re-emerges. Then there was Jon Stewart, not the comedian, but a UFO investigator and journalist, who posted something that read like a warning from another era. My source has gone dark. NASA is shutting down, and even Congress is in a recess. If Threless activates, ancient texts warn the sky will burn with knowing light and the world will forget its reflection. They called it prophecy. The agencies call it protocol. I call it imminent. Ancient texts, Vatican files, the harbinger. These hashtags were trending alongside technical astronomical discussions. What do you do with that? How do you separate signal from noise when the noise might be the signal? Because here is the uncomfortable truth. In the last 48 hours, as these posts went viral, not a single official image from the Mars flyby has been released. Not from NASA, not from ESA, not from the Chinese Tianwen. One mission, or the UAE's Hope orbiter, all of which were watching. The only visual evidence we have comes from an astrophotographer named Simeon Schmaus, who stacked 20 images from the Perseverance rover's mast cams camera and found what he described as a faint smudge of light in the constellation Corona Borealis, close to the location where the comet was expected. A faint smudge. That is what we got from humanity's closest look at an interstellar visitor from spacecraft that can resolve features smaller than a car on the Martian surface. We got a faint smudge, unless, of course, they saw something else entirely and chose not to show us. The 3 Atlas Anomaly account continued posting updates that grew increasingly specific. Unexpected brightening. The object is brightening faster than models predicted, suggesting more volatile or efficient outgassing mechanisms than expected for its distance. Spacecraft to observe during solar conjunction. As the object slips behind the sun, ground observations cut off. ESA is repurposing Mars orbiters to monitor it near the October 3rd Mars flyby at approximately 30 million kilometers. Every update was technically accurate. Every detail could be verified against published scientific observations. And yet, the conclusion they were building toward was unmistakable. This was not behaving like a comet. And then came the detail that nobody could explain away, the shape. Multiple amateur astronomers working independently report when they processed their images, enhanced the contrast, removed the background stars. What remained was not the fuzzy, irregular blob you would expect from a comet with an active coma. It was elongated, smooth, almost geometric, perfectly cylindrical, as UFO Mania had said. Now, skeptics would point out that elongation can be an artifact of motion, of image processing, of the way light scatters through a coma. And they would be right. It can be, but it can also be real. We know this because Oumuamua, the first interstellar visitor, was also elongated, pancake-shaped, some said, cigar-shaped, others argued, but definitely not round, definitely not what we expected. So when 3I Atlas shows similar characteristics, when multiple, independent observers report the same geometric quality, when the official channels remain silent, what are we supposed to think? The answer, according to NASA's carefully worded statements, is that 3 Atlas poses no threat to Earth. Its trajectory keeps it safely hundreds of millions of kilometers. It will make its closest approach to the Sun on October 30th, then continue on its journey out of the solar system, never to return. All of which is true, all of which sidesteps the question everyone is actually asking. What is it and why? On the day we should have gotten our best look at it, did 15,000 NASA employees get sent home? Chapter 2. What I'm about to tell you happened in August of 2025, 2 months before the Mars flyby, before the shutdown, before any of the viral posts that captured public attention. And it happened under conditions that make it impossible to dismiss as wishful thinking or confirmation bias. Her name is Birdie Jaworski, and if you know anything about remote viewing, former vice president of the Farsight Institute, nearly 30 years of professional remote viewing experience, a master's degree in digital forensics. Not exactly the profile of someone chasing internet fame with wild claims. In August, a friend gave her a set of coordinates, just numbers, no context, no photographs, no news articles. This is how legitimate remote viewing works. The target remains completely blind. The viewer has no idea what they are looking at until after the session is complete. Birdie sat down, entered her protocol, and began to describe what she was perceiving. The first thing she reported was movement through space. Something traveling, something old, very old. She described it as a natural object, icy, rocky, exactly what you would expect if someone asked you to remote view a comet. And for a while, that is all it was. But then she noticed something unusual. There was something that was not completely natural, she said later in podcast discussing her findings. There was something strange. The way she described it, it felt like discovering a fingerprint on something that should be pristine, a signature where there should be only randomness. She kept going deeper into the session, and that is when she perceived it. Something small about the size of something that had been deliberately placed inside this object, not on the surface, inside. Someone had bored into this rock, she reported. Bored into this icy rock deliberately and placed something encoded with all kinds of information. It is kind of like an archive, a message in a bottle. But it is not just a message. It is technology of some sort. Not alien beings, not a massive spacecraft. A thumb drive-sized piece of technology, ancient beyond measure, hidden inside a comet that has been traveling through the galaxy
Saturn,
for
scattering
billions of
green
years.
dust into
She
the
went
rings.
further. This thing is so old, and even though the object itself is like billions of years old, the thing that was placed inside of it is also very, very old. Did some species there on the other side of the galaxy send up a little robot to bore into it and stick their little message and technology, knowing that this thing was going to keep traveling? It is a question that sounds like science fiction until you remember that we have done exactly this. The Voyager probes carry golden records, time capsules designed to survive for billions of years, in the hope that
What
the
is
idea
that?
of using natural objects
What are we
as
seeing?
vessels for messages is not
Oh my
alien
God.
to us at all. We just have not thought about it in reverse. The friend who gave Birdie the coordinates waited until after the session to reveal what she had been viewing. 3 Atlas, the interstellar object that would not even make headlines until weeks later. She had been viewing something that most of the world did not yet know existed, but Birdie was not finished. She did 2 more sessions going deeper, trying to understand what she was perceiving. And in those follow-up sessions, she discovered something that changed the entire picture. It is also broadcasting. She reported these messages come out in pulses, broadcasting present tense, not was broadcasting billions of years ago. When the podcast host mentioned that astronomer Avi Lowe had recently published calculations showing 3I Atlas arrived from the same region of the sky as the famous WOW signal from 1977. Birdie did not hesitate. That is super interesting. She said it is very possible that that is the WOW signal. Now you might be wondering how
One
much weight
fragment
to give to
plunges
remote
into the
viewing.
great red spot.
Testimony. It is not a conventional scientific method. It cannot be easily replicated or verified. Skeptics dismiss it entirely. Believers swear by it. And the truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the complicated middle. But here is what makes Bird's account worth considering. She was not alone. Multiple remote viewing groups working independently targeted 3I Atlas in the months following its discovery. And while the specifics varied, certain themes emerged again and again. Technology, deliberate placement, broadcasting. One group reported perceiving humanoid forms associated with the object. Another described what they called graffiti, markings, signatures. Someone had signed it. Several viewers reported the sensation of the object being masked, deliberately avoiding detection, as if it did not want to be fully seen. One particularly detailed report mentioned special access, extraction, points, a Comet. These were not vague mystical impressions. They were specific, technical details that sounded more like intelligence briefing than psychic session. And then there were the more disturbing elements. References to crop circles, advanced spherical craft, hybrid warfare, invisible war. The phrase brain-scanning technologies appeared in multiple independent sessions. The suggestion that whatever this was, it had the capability to influence minds, to incite. Now, does any of this prove 3 Atlas is anything other than a comet? Of course not. Remote viewing, even at its most rigorous, remains in the realm of anomalous cognition, not hard science. These are not measurements, they're not photographs, they're subjective impressions filtered through human consciousness. But they are also remarkably consistent across multiple, independent viewers who had no contact with each other. And they align in eerie ways with the physical anomalies that telescopes were beginning to detect. Consider what Birdie described, a small, technological device, billions of years old, placed deliberately inside a comet. If that were true, what would we expect to see? We would expect the object to look like a comet from a distance. Ice, dust, outgassing, all the normal signatures. But up close, unusual chemical compositions, unexpected materials, behaviors that seem almost designed rather than random. We would expect it to be massive, far more massive than its visible size suggests, because there would be something dense at its core, something that does not sublimate, something that remains intact no matter how much ice boils away. And we would expect it perhaps to be transmitting, not loudly, not obviously, but if you knew where to look, if you had the right instruments pointed in the right direction at the right time, you might detect something, a pulse, a pattern, a signal that should not be there. Birdie Dworsky perceived all of this in August, before most of the scientific data was published, before the anomalies became undeniable, before NASA went silent. She described message in a bottle traveling through the galaxy, and now, as 3i Atlas hides behind the sun, as official channels refuse to release images from the
Look
Mars
at that crater!
flyby. As amateur astronomers
Another
report
one.
cylindrical shapes and scientists
Incredible.
detect impossible chemistry. That bottle is getting
Dust
closer to
storms swirl
perihelion,
around
the
them
point
as
of
they
maximum
approach.
heat, maximum stress, the point where, as Avi put it, confessions are elicited. If there is a thumb drive-sized piece of technology buried in the heart of this comet, October 29th is when it will either reveal itself or remain hidden forever. And the fact that NASA sent 15,000 employees home right before we could get our best look raises, question that remote viewers have been asking since August. What did they see that we are not being shown? Chapter 3, NASA's deafening silence. October 3rd, 2025 was supposed to be historic. The day humanity got its closest look at an interstellar visitor. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter positioned perfectly. High-rise camera, ready to capture resolution 30 times, better than anything Hubble could achieve. ESA's Mars Express and ExoMars trace gas, orbiter standing by with full instrument arrays. Then, at the exact moment when we needed NASA most, 83% of the 5 gone during what should have been the most intensive observation campaign in the history of interstellar astronomy. The official explanation was simple. Federal government shutdown, budget impasse, nothing to do with 3i Atlas. Just unfortunate timing. Unfortunate timing. Those 2 words doing a lot of work to explain why the world's premier space agency went dark precisely when an object exhibiting 7 statistical impossibilities passed within 29 million K-meters of our Mars spacecraft. Think about the odds of that for a moment.
It's alive!
3 Atlas was discovered in Prefi Atlas, July. The Mars flyby was planned for months. Scientists knew this would be their only chance to capture high-resolution images before the object disappeared behind the Sunday NASA. Every space agency on Earth knew. And in the final week before closest approach, the United States government shut down. NASA's official website stopped updating, press releases ceased. The army of scientists who should have been analyzing data, processing images, making discoveries, they were sent home. Only essential personnel remained, a skeleton crew maintaining critical operations. But
It
here
unfolds
is what makes it suspicious.
like origami,
Raw image
made of
feeds from
metal and
Perseverance
light.
rover kept uploading. The rover did not stop working. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter did
like
not stop
origami,
working. The
made of
cameras were
metal
active.
and
The
light.
data was being collected. It just was not being released to the public. Amateur astronomer Dobsonian Power, a YouTuber with a solar telescope, posted an image on October 3rd with a simple caption, "What on earth is it?" The image showed something dark, angular embedded within the expected position of 3I Atlas. Within hours, the post had thousands of views. People demanding answers. People pointing out that if a backyard observer could capture this, what were the professional instruments seeing? NASA said nothing. EA said nothing. The only official confirmation that observations had occurred came from Simeon Schmaus, the astrophotographer, who stacked 20 Perseverance images and found that faint smudge. He posted his work on social media, not through official channels, a private citizen doing the work that space agencies would not. Then came the White House press briefing. Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, was discussing the government shutdown when a reporter asked a question that had been circulating online for days. Has the president been briefed about 3.3 Atlas? The room went quiet. Miller paused, chose his words carefully, and deflected. The briefing moved on, but the question had been asked on camera in an official setting,
message.
which meant it could no longer be dismissed as internet. The United States government was being asked directly about an interstellar
It's
object,
a message.
and they were choosing not to answer. Meanwhile, Havel was making the rounds on news networks, Newsmax, CBS, podcasts, anyone who would listen. He laid out the anomalies with mathematical precision. The trajectory aligned with the ecliptic plane, 0.2% probability. The timing optimized for planetary encounters, 0.005% probability. The 7 characteristics that made 3I Atlas unlike anything ever observed. And he kept returning to one point. We need the Mars orbiter data. The high-ray images could tell us the diameter of the nucleus. They could resolve structure. They could answer the fundamental question of what we are looking at. But the image on a podcast with Brian Keating, Lowe mentioned that Representative Tim Burchett, member of the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, had appeared with him on Newsmax to discuss the object, a sitting congressman on national television talking about an interstellar visitor and the suspicious silence surrounding it. This was no longer fringe discussion. This was entering mainstream political discourse. And still NASA said nothing. The European Space Agency released a statement confirming that Mars Express and ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter had successfully observed 3I Atlas during the flyby window of October 1st through 7th. Instruments, including the high-resolution stereo camera, the color and stereo surface imaging system, and multiple spectrometers had collected data that would be analyzed in the coming weeks. They said results to be published when ready, but no images, no preliminary findings, no excitement about capturing unprecedented views of an interstellar object at closest range, just a dry confirmation that observations occurred followed by silence. China's Tianwen 1 mission said nothing. The UAE's Hope orbiter said nothing. Every spacecraft at Mars had been watching, and every space agency. You do not need to be a conspiracy theorist to find this strange. You just need to remember what happened with 2 Boris, the previous interstellar comet. When it passed through in 2019, images flooded out immediately. Scientists were excited. Press releases flew. The astronomical community celebrated. It was treated exactly as you would expect. A rare visitor from beyond our solar system, worthy of intense study and public engagement. 3 Atlas gets silence. The difference perhaps is that 2E Boris behaved exactly like a comet. It had the right chemistry, the right tail, the right outgassing patterns. It was interesting because it came from interstellar space, but it was not anomalous. It did not challenge our understanding. It did not raise uncomfortable questions. 3 Atlas does all of those things, and so, as it disappeared behind the sun on its way to perihelion, as it entered the one place in the solar system where no telescope on Earth can see it.
Connection established between
Amateur astronomers
distant
posted
worlds.
their last. Scientists published their papers carefully, worded technically precise, avoiding speculation. And 15,000 NASA employees waited to be called back to work, wondering what their colleagues with essential status had, seen in those Mars orbiter images that the public was not being shown. Chapter 4. 7 Impossible Things. There is a principle in science called Occam's razor. When you have competing explanations, the simplest one is usually correct. 1 and 2 might be coincidence. But when you stack 7 statistical impossibilities on top of each other, Occam's razor starts cutting in a different direction. Let me walk you through what makes 3I Atlas unlike anything we have ever tracked through our solar system. Anomaly 1. The mass problem. When astronomers first calculated the size of 3I Atlas based on its brightness, if all that light was just reflected sunlight, the object would have to be somewhere between 10 and 20 km across.
It
For
resembles
context,
a ring
Oumuamua
world
was barely
orbiting a
100
dead
meters.
star.
2I Boris was less than 1 kilometer.
It
This
resembles
thing appeared to be
a ring
orders
world
of magnitude larger.
orbiting a dead
The statistical models that predict how many interstellar objects we should detect are very clear. Small objects are common. Large objects are exceedingly rare. We should have found hundreds, maybe thousands of Oumuamua-ized visitors before stumbling across something the size of 3I Atlas. The probability was calculated at roughly 0.01%, 1 inch, 10,000. But then came the astrometric data, over 4,000 measurements from 227 observatories between May and September. When scientists analyzed the object's trajectory and compared it to pure gravitational acceleration, they found something remarkable. Almost no, despite heavy outgassing, despite losing 150 kilograms of material per second, the object barely budged from its expected path. That implies enormous mass, a nucleus so heavy that even constant jetting of gas and dust cannot push it off course. The calculations suggested more than 33 billion tons, a diameter larger than 5 kilometers, making it not just bigger than the previous interstellar visitors, but roughly 1 million times more massive than Oumuamua. 1 million is like comparing a grain of sand to a boulder. Anomaly 2. The sun would glow. Hubble captured the highest resolution image of 3 Atlas on July 21st, 2025. Scientists analyzing that image noticed something that had never been documented in any comet, solar system, or interstellar. The scattered light around. The object extended roughly twice as far toward the sun as it did perpendicular or opposite to the sunday. Comets have tails that point away from the sun because radiation pressure pushes dust particles outward. This is basic physics, confirmed by thousands of observations over centuries. 3 Atlas appeared to be violating that principle. The extension was not subtle. It was a 10-to-1 ratio, 10 times longer in the solar direction than sideways. And this was observed edge-on, meaning the true elongation was even more
Ocean
extreme
tides
when accounting for viewing
subtly
geometry.
as gravity trembles.
Avive and Eric Keto published a paper offering an explanation involving ice fragments that sublimate at different rates depending on which side of the object they are ejected from. The physics was sound, the math checked out, but it required a very specific set of conditions that had never been observed before in any other comet. A unique configuration that just happened to occur in an interstellar visitor already exhibiting multiple other anomalies. Anomaly 3, the industrial fingerprint. In late August and early September, the Very Large Telescope in Chile trained its UV spectrograph on 3A Atlas and detected something that stopped scientists cold. Nickel atoms in the gas plume, lots of nickel rising exponentially as the object approached the sun, increasing by a power law of roughly 9. But here is the problem. They detected almost no iron. In nature, nickel and iron are born together in supernova explosions. Every natural comet ever observed shows nickel and iron in similar abundances.
Microscopic structures
2I.
rearranged
Borisov,
like living
the previous
code.
interstellar comet, had normal nickel to iron ratios. Every solar system comet has normal ratios. 3I. Atlas was producing nickel without iron. The only place we see that signature is in industrial production. Nickel alloys, materials that have been deliberately refined and separated. The scientists who published this data were careful in their wording. They called it extremely puzzling. They noted that the temperature at the object's distance from the sun was far too low to vaporize the refractory minerals that contain these metals under normal conditions. They proposed some chemical pathways that might explain it, but you could feel the uncertainty in the prose. Anomaly 4, polarization from another world. When light scatters off particles, it becomes polarized. The degree and direction of polarization tells you about the size, shape, and composition of those particles. Comets have characteristic polarization signatures. We have measured hundreds of them. The patterns are well understood. 3E Atlas showed a polarization signature that does not exist in any catalogue. Negative 2.77% at a phase angle of around 7 degrees, an inversion angle of only 17 degrees. This combination had never been measured in any asteroid or comet, solar system, or interstellar. The closest match was not comets at all. It was trans-Neptunian objects and a specific centaur called Pholus, icy bodies from the outer reaches of the solar system with very different compositions and histories than typical comets. A paper submitted to the astrophysical journal Letters concluded that 3 Atlas may represent a distinct type of comet, expanding the diversity of known interstellar bodies. Distinct type is scientific language, for we have no category for this. The solar system is basically flat. The planets orbit in a plane called the ecliptic. Random objects from interstellar space derive from random directions crossing that plane at random angles.
In real time.
The probability of an interstellar visitor's orbit aligning within 5 degrees of the ecliptic is roughly 0.2%, 1 inch 500. 3 Atlas arrived, aligned within 5 degrees. Not only that, but it is moving retrograde, opposite to the direct. This is the ideal trajectory if you wanted to survey multiple planets with minimum course corrections. Anomaly 6, the planetary timing. 3, Atlas will pass close to 3 planets during its flyby.
Deliberate, controlled.
Venus at 0.65 astronomical units, Mars at 0.19 AU, Jupiter at 0.36 AU. The probability of the random interstellar visitor arriving with timing that allows close approaches to 3 different planets is approximately 0.005%. 1 in. If you were designing a reconnaissance mission to our solar system, this is the trajectory you would choose. Anomaly 7, the WOW signal, coincidence. In 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope detected a signal so unusual that astronomer Jerry Amon wrote "wow" in the margins. It came from the constellation Sagittarius, lasted 72 seconds, and has never been detected again, despite decades of searching. When scientists traced 3I Atlas's trajectory backward through the galaxy, accounting for its speed and direction, they calculated where it would have been in 1977. The answer within 9 degrees of the WOW signal origin. The probability of this alignment is roughly 0.6%. 7 anomalies, 7 statistical long shots, and we're being asked to believe they are all coincidence. Chapter 5. October. Right now, as you listen to this, 3 Atlas is somewhere we cannot see it, hidden behind the sun, moving toward a point in space where physics becomes brutally honest. Perihelion, the closest approach to our star. For 3I Atlas, that moment arrives on October 29th, 2025, at a distance of roughly 1.44 astronomical units, just inside the orbit of Mars. Close enough that the sun stops being a distant light source and becomes an overwhelming. Imagine standing in front of an open blast furnace. Now, multiply that heat by a factor you cannot comprehend. That is what perihelion means for an object coming in from the cold darkness of interstellar space. Sunlight pounding the surface with gigawatt of power. Not metaphorical power. Actual measurable watts. The kind that runs cities. A vibe. Made an observation that stuck with a lot of people. High stress environments, illicit confessions. He was talking about interrogation tactics, but the principle applies to physics too. When you heat ice, it cannot pretend to be anything other than ice. When you heat rock, it behaves like rock. And when you heat something that is pretending to be a comet, but might be something else entirely, the mask comes off. There are two scenarios for what happens at perihelion, and they could not be more different. Scenario 1, 3I Atlas, is exactly what it appears to be, a comet. An unusually massive, chemically strange, statistically improbable comet, but natural nonetheless. In this scenario, October 29th marks the beginning of spectacular activity.
They shimmer like emerald fireflies.
Surface temperature rises. Volatiles that have been dormant for billions of years suddenly find themselves bathed in solar radiation. Carbon dioxide sublimates. Water ice turns to vapor. Dust particles lift off in enormous plumes. We have seen this happen before. Comets near perihelion, they develop tails, millions of kilometers long. They brighten dramatically. Sometimes they fragment under the stress, breaking into pieces that eventually disperse. It is violent, chaotic, and utterly beautiful. If
Observe.
3 Atlas is natural, we should see
Do not fear.
something similar. A massive outburst of gas and dust. Brightness increasing by
Observe.
factors of 10 or more.
Do not fear.
The development of a proper tail, not the anomalous sunward
We are
glow,
running out of
but a
time.
classic cometary tail
I am on it.
streaming behind it as radiation pressure does its work. And if the object is
Prepare
as
all
fragile as
systems
some
for immediate
scientists
deployment.
suspect, if that 5 kilometers diameter is mostly loosely bound ice rather than solid, rock, perihelion might tear it apart entirely. We could watch in real time as an interstellar visitor disintegrates into fragments, giving us an unprecedented look at the internal structure of a comet from another star system. That would be extraordinary. That would answer questions about comet formation, about the composition of planetary systems beyond our own, about the processes that fling objects into interstellar space. It would be a scientific bonanza, even if it destroys the object we're studying. 3 Atlas is not natural. The anomalies are not
Its
coincidences.
surface glows
The
like
nickel without
liquid metal.
iron, the backwards tail, the perfect alignment with the ecliptic and the wow signal origin, they mean something. In this scenario, perihelion is not about sublimation. It is about activation. Think about what you would do if you were sending a probe to another star system. You would need it to survive the journey. Billions of years in the cold, radiation, impacts, the slow decay of time. Wrapping it in ice makes perfect sense. Ice is common. It is protective. It makes the probe look natural to any civilization that might spot it before it is ready to be noticed. But once that probe reaches the inner solar system, once it approaches the host star, it needs to wake up. It needs power, and there is only one power source available: the star itself. Perihelion in this scenario is not a stress test. It is a charging station. Load out the possibilities in his papers with mathematical precision. The object could use a solar orth maneuver. This is a real technique used by our own spacecraft. You dive close to the sun, use its gravity to accelerate and change your trajectory dramatically with minimal fuel expenditure. It is the most efficient way to alter course in the solar system. The optimal point for this maneuver is at perihelion, and 3 Atlas reaches perihelion while completely
piece
obscured from
drifts
Earth-based
upward,
observation,
merging into
hidden
orbit.
behind the sunday. If it wanted to change course without being detected, this would be the moment.
piece
Or
drifts
it could
upward,
release something.
merging into
Mini
orbit.
probes, small craft that detach and use the retrograde trajectory to intercept planets, Mars, Earth, Jupiter, all reachable from this position with minimal course corrections. The timing of the planetary alignments makes this almost trivially easy compared to random arrival times. Lowe was
The
careful to note the
fragments
implications.
arrange into
If
perfect
3 Atlas
circles.
maneuvers toward Earth, when it reappears on the other side of the sun, the financial markets may crash. That is not hyperbole. That is a sober assessment of what happens when humanity realizes it is not alone and the visitors might not be friendly. But we will not know. Not yet. Because between now and early December, we are blind. Every telescope on Earth, every space-based observatory, They cannot see behind the Sunday. 3 Atlas is in a communication blackout that would be perfect for a spacecraft that did not want to advertise its next move. The European Space Agency has a contingency plan between November 2nd and 25th. The Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer spacecraft, currently in transit to Jupiter, will turn its instruments towards 3I Atlas. JUICE will catch the object just after perihelion, when it should be at peak activity, when whatever is going to happen has already happened. JUICE was not designed to study comets. Its cameras and spectrometers are optimized for icy moons, for detecting subsurface oceans, for analyzing the chemistry of alien water. But those same instruments can look at 3 Atlas. And because JUICE is between Earth and the Sun, it has a viewing angle we do not have from our planet. If the object develops a massive coma and tail,
The same
JUICE
symbol
will see
appears.
it. If
a
it fragments,
spiral of
JUICE will
stars.
document the debris field. And if it does something unexpected, if it maneuvers or releases objects or exhibits any behavior inconsistent with a natural comet, JUICE will record that too. The data will not be instant. Space communication takes time, and JUICE is far from home. But by late November, early December, we will have answers. The same December 19th is when the object makes its closest approach to our planet. Still 1.8 date astronomical units away. Still no threat, but close. Enough that every major observatory will be watching. Close enough that we will be able to track its trajectory with extreme precision. And that is when we will know if anything changed. If the orbit is exactly as predicted by gravitational models, we can breathe easier. Another interstellar visitor, strange but natural, passing through onto its way back to the cosmic dark. But if the numbers are off, if the trajectory shows even slight deviations that cannot be explained by outgassing or solar radiation pressure, then every assumption we have made about our place in the universe will need revision. October 29th, the Day 3 Atlas confesses what it really is, except we will not hear that confession, and by then, it might be too
It turns
late to do
toward the
anything but
camera,
watch what
watching
happens
us.
next. Chapter 6. The Global Panic. While scientists debated data and NASA maintained its silence, something else was happening. Something that spread faster than any scientific paper could be peer-reviewed. The internet was catching fire. It started in the United States, as these things often do. TikTok videos showing alleged images of
It's
3I
the size of an entire
Atlas,
solar
some
system.
real, mosted, all accumulating millions of views. Reddit. Threads sprawling into thousands of comments. Twitter, or X as it is now called, became a battleground between amateur astronomers
Its
hosting
movement
legitimate observations
bends
and
light,
influencers, chasing
forming
engagement with
halos
increasingly
of
wild
color.
claims. But America was just the beginning. In India, the story mutated
Its
into
movement
something altogether
bends light,
different.
forming
WhatsApp,
halos of color.
the primary communication tool, for hundreds of millions, became a vector for rumors that traveled faster than fact-checkers could respond. Forwards in Hindi describing an alien ship in disguise. Videos narrated with urgent voices claiming the object was changing course. Screenshots of fake news articles with headlines designed to terrify. One particularly viral forward claimed that world governments were already negotiating with whoever or whatever was aboard 3I Atlas. Another suggested military force. A third showed an edited image purporting to be from NASA, stamped classified,
It lands
showing a
softly
geometric
on a quiet
structure where the
planet
comet
covered
should
in
be.
oceans.
None of it was true. All of it spread anyway. Hindi language
It
YouTube
lands
channels
softly
exploded
on a
with
quiet
content.
planet
Some
covered in oceans.
were earnest attempts at science communication, explaining what an interstellar object actually was. Others leaned hard into speculation, blending legitimate astronomical facts with ancient astronaut theories and profit. The line between education and entertainment blurred until it vanished entirely. Brazil saw similar dynamics play out on Telegram and Facebook. UFO enthusiast, communities already primed to see patterns in the sky, went into overdrive. Groups that had spent years analyzing lights over the Amazon now had something concrete to analyze. An actual object from interstellar
From
space,
orbit,
exhibiting
it looks like a
behaviors that even
fractal city
scientists
beneath
called
the sea.
puzzling the conspiracy ecosystem in Brazil.
From
It
orbit,
blends
it looks
indigenous
like a
mythology,
fractal city beneath
Catholic
the sea.
mysticism, and modern UFO lore into something that defies easy categorization. 3 Atlas became everything to everyone, a harbinger of the apocalypse, a vessel of enlightened beings come to save humanity from itself, a weapon, a gift, a test. Facebook groups swelled with new members. Live streams discussing the object ran for hours. Hosts reading scientific papers aloud, then immediately pivoting to speculation that went far beyond anything those papers claimed. The comment sections were digital campfires where thousands gathered to share fears and theories in equal measure. The United Kingdom, with its long history of crop circles and mod UFO investigations, approached 3 Islas with a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. British tabloids ran headlines that walked a careful line between sensational and plausibly deniable. Massive comet could be alien tech. Scientists say the scientists in question were usually just a vibe quoted out of context, but the headlines did their work. Russia predictably saw the whole thing through a geopolitical lens. State media mentioned the object in passing, always careful to note American. Some suggested Western powers were manufacturing a crisis to justify increased military spending. Others hinted darkly that the US government knew more than it was saying. Perhaps even that American black budget programs had made contact. Russian language forums lit up with technical discussions. The level of astronomical knowledge was often impressive, but mixed in with legitimate science were suggestions that 3 Atlas was recovered alien technology, ancient conspiracies stretching back to the Soviet era. Then came the Mikio Kaku incident. A screenshot began circulating showing the theoretical physicist in what appeared to be a television interview. Text overlay claimed he'd stated that 3I Atlas was on its way to conduct a reconnaissance mission, possibly with hostile intent. The caption read, "It might be an alien probe sent to Earth." The image was real, the context was not.
Earth receives faint echoes of that
traced the
same
screenshot
signal
back to a Nation
decades
News
later.
interview from February 20th, 2025.
faint echoes
Months
of that
before
same
3I
signal
Atlas was even
decades
discovered,
later.
Kaku had been discussing a completely different topic,
It matches the
likely an
3I
asteroid
/
impact
Atlas
scenario.
patterns.
Someone had lifted his image, added false text, and released it into the wild. It did not matter.
It matches the 3I /
The post
Atlas
accumulated over
patterns.
290,000 views before platforms started flagging it. By then, it had been screenshot and reshared countless times, each iteration becoming harder to trace back to the fabrication. Lord Bebo, the account that posted it, never issued a correction. The damage was done.
All over the world,
Thousands of people now
look up in
believed a
awe.
respected physicist had confirmed 3I Atlas was hostile alien technology. NASA tried to respond. Their official solar system account posted on September 30th, Comet 3. I Atlas poses no threat to Earth. It will remain hundreds of millions of kilometers away from our planet. This is a natural
Astronomers have
interstellar
confirmed
object,
that these
extremely
distant stars
rare
are
and
actually
scientifically
pulsing.
valuable, but not dangerous. The response was immediate. and
Astronomers
skeptical.
confirm
If it is just a
distant
comet,
stars
why the
are
shutdown?
pulsing back.
If it is not dangerous, why the silence? If it is natural, explain the nickel without iron.
Cosmic
NASA did not engage further.
begins.
The statement stood alone, a single tweet against a tsunami of speculation. Al Jazeera's fact-checking agency, SANAD, published a thorough investigation. They confirmed that 3 Atlas was real, discovered by the Atlas telescope on July 1st, 2025. They verified that it posed no threat, with the closest approach to Earth remaining about 270 million kilometers. They debunked the Kaku quotes, the military mobilization claims, the secret negotiation rumors. Their fact check was solid journalism. It probably changed very few minds, because while Sanad was checking facts, Avi Loeb was addressing the United Nations, not officially, not in the General Assembly, but in conversations with delegates, in papers circulated among policy advisors, in quiet meetings, where the word existential gets used without irony. He presented his black swan event scenario, the idea that low probability, high-impact events require preparation, even when, especially when we think they're unlikely. A black swan is something that seems impossible until it happens, then seems obvious in retrospect. The concept was, developed by Nassim Taleb to explain financial crashes, but Lowe applied it to interstellar visitors. We assume they are all natural because we've only seen natural ones. But what happens when the assumption breaks? Number the Harbinger started trending
Within it,
not in mainstream
colossal
feeds,
shapes
but in
move
specific
without.
communities. The term came from ancient
Within
texts,
it,
from
colossal shapes
prophecies that
move
describe
across.
messengers from the sky,
Ancient,
harbingers of
gentle
change, of
beings.
judgment, of transformation. Some took it literally. End times theology mapped surprisingly well onto an interstellar object exhibiting impossible characteristics. Others used it metaphorically, a harbinger of the new space age, of humanity's awakening to a universe more crowded than we imagined. And through it all, through the panic and speculation and wild theories, one voice kept appearing in the discourse. Stefan Burns, the cosmologist Money. Penny had mentioned, claims circulated that he believed 3I Atlas was intelligent, that it exhibited consciousness, that it was already communicating with us and with other planets. No one could find where Burns had actually said this. No published papers, no interviews, just second-hand reports and cryptic social media posts. But the idea stuck because it fit too well with everything else that was happening. The anomalies, the silence, the sense that something was unfolding just beyond our ability to see it clearly. Chapter 7, December's Verdict. Early December 2025. 3 Atlas will emerge from behind the sun like a swimmer surfacing after a long dive. Astronomers will find it in the constellation Virgo, low on the eastern horizon in the magnitude 12 or 13, still too faint for amateur telescopes, but well within reach of professional observatories, and everyone will be watching the numbers. Orbital mechanics is one of the most precise sciences we have. Newton's laws, refined by Einstein's relativity, allow us to predict where an object will be years in advance down to the kilometer. We can account for gravitational perturbations from planets, radiation pressure from sunlight, even the subtle push of outgassing as comets shed material. When 3I Atlas reappears, its position will tell a story. If it is exactly where pure gravitational calculations say it should be, give or take the expected deviation from outgassing, then we can reasonably conclude that nothing unusual happened during its time behind the Sunday. It passed perihelion, survived the heat, and continued on its predetermined path into the outer solar system and eventually back to interstellar space. But if the position is off, if the trajectory shows changes that cannot be explained by known forces, then every paper written about this object will need an addendum. Every assumption will crack open, because objects do not just change course on their own. The Vera Rubin Observatory will play a crucial role in what happens next. This telescope, which only recently became operational, represents a revolution in how we survey the sky. Previous asteroid surveys found around 20,000 new objects per year. Rubin found 14 asteroids in its first 10 hours of operation. 10 hours, 2,000 asteroids. The implications are staggering. When Rubin turns its attention to searching for interstellar objects, the trickle becomes a flood. Scientists estimate we could be detecting dozens of interstellar visitors per year instead of one every few years. And each one will be studied with the lessons learned from 3I Atlas fresh in our minds. We will know what to look for, the chemical signatures, the polarization characteristics, the trajectory, alignments. If 3 Atlas is truly anomalous, we will have other objects to compare it against. If it is the first of a new category, but December is not just about orbital, mechanics and future surveys. It is about questions that have been building since July. What did the Mars orbiters actually see? By December, the government shutdown will be long over. NASA will be back at full staff. The high images from October 3rd will have been processed, analysed, and either filed away or prepared for publication. Those images taken when 3 Atlas was just 29 million kilometers from, the camera could resolve features on the nucleus.
The
if the coma
skyline
was not too
flickers
dense.
Palais,
A 5 kilometers
powered
wide
by
object
energy
at that
drawn
distance
from
should show
meteors.
structure. Not fine detail, but gross morphology. Is it round, elongated, irregular? Are there variations in brightness suggesting different materials on the surface? Does it look like other comet nuclei we have photographed, or is it something else? The fact that these images have not been released raises questions that will not go away just because the calendar turns to December. Scientific data is usually published as quickly as possible. The competition to be first with new findings is fierce. The fact that multiple space agencies observed 3 Eye Atlas at Mars and none have released detailed imagery suggests either massive coordination in silence, which seems unlikely, or that what they saw requires careful consideration before going public. December will force a reckoning on this silence. Either the images emerge and confirm it is just an unusual comet, or the absence of images becomes its own answer. Radio astronomers will also be watching. The WOW signal connection is either coincidence or it is not. If 3 Atlas was the source in 1977 and, if it is still capable of transmitting, December provides another opportunity to detect something. Multiple radio telescopes have been quietly monitoring the region where 3 Atlas should be. Not with the fanfare of SET's usual campaigns, but with steady, patient observation. Any signal, any pulse, any pattern in the radio frequencies that correlates with the object's position would be revolutionary. The hydrogen line at 1,420 megahertz is the frequency to watch. That is where the WOW signal appeared. That is where any civilization trying to be heard would broadcast, because hydrogen is the most common element in the universe, and its spectral line is a universal constant. If 3 Eye Atlas has something to say, that is where it will say it. December 19th marks the moment of closest approach to Earth.
It points to Earth.
1.8 astronomical units, roughly 270 million km. For perspective, that is about 1.5 times the distance from Earth to the Sunday. Not close by any measure. That matters for safety, but close enough that parallax becomes significant. Parallax is the apparent shift in an object's position when viewed from different locations. As Earth orbits the Sun, our viewing angle on 3 Eye Atlas changes slightly. By measuring the shift with extreme precision, we can triangulate the object's exact distance and velocity. Any deviation from the expected values becomes immediately obvious. Observatories across the globe will coordinate observations, northern and southern hemispheres, different longitudes providing round-the-clock coverage. Amateur astronomers will contribute data alongside professionals. It will be one of the most thoroughly documented observations of any solar system object in history. And somewhere in all that data, we will find either confirmation or contradiction. Confirmation that this is, despite everything, a natural object from interstellar space exhibiting rare but explainable characteristics, an ambassador from another planetary system. Strange, because it formed under different conditions than our solar system's comets, but ultimately following the same physics or contradiction. Something in the trajectory, the chemistry, the behavior that cannot be reconciled with natural origins, a data point that breaks the model, evidence that forces us to consider what we have been avoiding considering. By late December, 3-time Atlas will be fading again as it recedes from the Sun, moving into the constellation Leo, heading back out toward the orbit of Jupiter, which it will pass in March of 2026. After that, the outer solar system, the Heliops stellar space. One way or another, December will give to us answers. Not all the answers, but enough to know whether we are watching the greatest comet show of our generation or the greatest upheaval in human understanding. Since we realized Earth was not the center of the universe, the telescopes are ready. The equations are prepared. The world is watching. Now, we wait for 3 Eye Atlas to emerge from behind the Sun and show us what it really is. Chapter 8. The Scientific Impossibilities. Let me take you deeper into the science that is keeping astronomers awake at night. Not the speculation, not the theories, but the actual measurements that do not make sense, no matter how many times you run the numbers. Start with the WOW signal. August 15th, 1977. The Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was conducting a routine SETI survey when it detected something that should not exist.
The entire
A
world
narrowband signal
is a
of
transmitter.
1,420.4 megahertz, exactly where you would expect an artificial transmission. It lasted 72 seconds, the exact duration the
Their
telescope's
sails
beam would
open,
take to sweep across a
catching
stationary
invisible
source as Earth
cosmic
rotated.
winds.
The signal was strong, 30 times louder than the background noise. On the printout, the intensity values climbed from the normal 1s and 2s up through 5s, 6s, and peaked at U, the highest value the system could print before it ran out of alphanumeric characters. Astronomer Jerry Amon saw those values climbing
We are
and wrote
connected.
one word in the margin. Wow.
Connected.
They searched for it again. For years, decades, the Big Ear telescope pointed at that same patch of sky hundreds of times. Other observatories joined the search. Nothing. The signal never repeated. After a while, it became astronomy's most famous mystery. Evidence of nothing, proof of nothing but impossible to forget. Now, trace 3I Atlas backward, through space. Account for its velocity of 60 kilometers per
surface,
second. Map its
alien
trajectory through the
cities
galaxy.
power up,
In
synchronized to
1977,
the orbit.
it would have been roughly 600 astronomical units from Earth, 600 times the distance from Earth to the Sun, 90 billion kilometers away. At that distance, to produce a signal as strong as what Big Ear detected would require a transmitter outputting between half a gigawatt
trembles.
and 2 GW of power.
The
That is not a
statues begin
battery,
to move.
that is not a generator, that is a nuclear reactor. Sustained output focused into a beam narrow enough to reach across 90 billion kilometers and still register 30 times. Above
They
background
rise
noise.
like whales,
Could a comet do that?
breaching
Not
a
with any
cosmic
physics we
ocean.
understand. They do not emit coherent radio signals. They do not broadcast at the exact frequency that happens to be the universal marker for
The
technological
debris becomes new
civilizations
moons
searching for each
orbiting
other.
the planet.
But an object designed to be found. An object that needed to announce itself before it entered the inner solar system, that would broadcast exactly this way. One strong pulse, enough to be unmistakable, then silence, because you would not want to give away your position until you were ready. Now move to the chemistry of the very large telescope data showing nickel without iron. In nature, these two elements are bonded together from birth. When a massive star explodes in a supernova, it forges heavy elements in the inferno. Nickel 56 decays into iron 56. They're created in the same nuclear processes, bound in the same minerals, released into space as an inseparable pair. Every meteorite, every asteroid, every comet ever analyzed shows them together. The ratio varies slightly depending on the environment, but they are always both present. 2I Borisov, coming from interstellar space, just like 3 Atlas, showed normal nickel-ion ratios. Solar system comets that show normal ratios. There is no natural process at the temperatures. 3I Atlas experiences that can separate these elements. But refinement, smelting, chemical processing, industrial production of nickel alloys requires removing iron contaminants. We do it on Earth, every high-purity nickel for electronics, for specialized alloys, for applications where iron would interfere. The process leaves a signature, nickel without iron. The scientists who published this data from the VT tried every natural explanation they could imagine. Maybe unusual chemical pathways in the ice. Maybe exotic minerals formed under conditions we've not seen before. Maybe dust-grained physics we do not fully understand. Every hypothesis ran into the same wall. The temperature is too low. The environment is wrong. This should not be happening. And it is not static. The nickel production increases with decreasing distance from the sun exponentially by a power law of roughly 9. That means every time the object gets 10% closer, the nickel output increases by a factor that climbs steeply. This is not random outgassing. This is a process ramping up as solar energy increases, almost like something powering on. Then there is the tale that the anti that breaks one of the simplest, most reliable rules in planetary science. Solar radiation pressure is not subtle. When photons from the sun hit dust particles, they transfer momentum. It is a tiny push, but
Astronomers
relentless.
realize
Over
it's the
time,
same
it
meteor
overcomes the weak
across
gravity
time.
of a comet and drives dust particles away from the Sunday. Every comet ever photographed shows this.
It never fell.
The tail always,
planned.
except 3 Atlas,
It
shows
traveled.
scattered light extending twice as far toward the sun
meteor
as away
becomes a
from it.
vessel
The Hubble
made of
image is
memory.
unambiguous. Enhancement of the data makes it even clearer. There is more stuff sunward than anti-sunward. A vibe, and Eric Keto published a model suggesting this could happen if the object sheds large ice fragments from its sun-facing side, and those fragments survive longer because they are bigger, creating an extended snow line in the solar direction. The physics works on paper. Ice fragments of specific sizes ejected at specific velocities
is
under
alive,
specific conditions of solar heating.
synchronized
But
with
those
life
conditions are
itself.
incredibly narrow. You need preferential ejection from the day side. You need the fragments to be
Cosmic
large enough to
rays
resist
bend around its hull
radiation
like
pressure,
liquid
but
glass.
small enough to scatter visible light efficiently. You need the evaporation rate to be just right, so the fragments survive long enough to create. It is possible barely. In the same way, it is possible to flip a coin 50 times and get heads every time. The laws of physics do not forbid it, but the probability makes you wonder if the coin is weighted. And this is the pattern. Every anomaly has a natural explanation that works if you're willing to accept that 3I Atlas is uniquely configured in ways no other comet has ever been. The mass can be explained if it is
It
uncommonly
emerges
dense.
near a
The
planet
trajectory
covered
can
entirely
be explained
in
if the
mirrors.
statistical fluke happened. The chemistry can be explained if exotic processes
Each
are
mirror
occurring.
reflects
The
a different
polarization can be
timeline.
explained if the dust grain distribution is unlike anything catalogued. Each explanation is plausible in
meteor
isolation,
hovers,
but they are
choosing
not in
one
isolation.
reflection to
They
enter.
stack. 7 anomalies, each requiring its own special
Inside
seeding,
the chosen
all occurring in
timeline,
the same object.
Earth is
At what
oceanic
point does
and
the
untouched.
simplest explanations stop being natural and start being designed? That is the question scientists are wrestling with as 3I Atlas hides behind the Sunday. As the data on October 1st, 2025, Space News, something passed within 250 miles of Earth. At that altitude, astronauts live, work aboard the International Space Station. Commercial satellites orbit in carefully
Life
tracked paths.
beneath
But
the
this
surface
object,
glows
Asteroid 2, we
with
discovered it
new
6
awareness.
hours after it had already screamed past us at over 13,000 miles per hour just above the South Pole. Think about that for a moment. A space rock the size of a small car moving faster than any bullet passed through the exact same airspace where humanity conducts its most advanced operations. And we had no idea it was coming. Meanwhile, on Mars, our rovers found what scientists are calling the clearest sign of ancient life we have ever discovered. Leopard spots frozen in time that might prove we were never alone. Congressional hearings just revealed footage of a military
Each
missile striking an
branch
unidentified object
like a
off the coast of Yemen.
tuning
And the
fork
object
in the
didn't
wind.
explode. It kept flying. The sun is entering what physicists call a last gasp phase that could light up our skies with auroras more intense than anything we've seen in decades.
Their
3 comets
trails
are
form
racing
circles
toward
of
us right
light
now,
around
turning
the planet.
green as they approach, and one might become visible to your naked eye within weeks. NASA has furled 15,000 employees while racing China to the moon, and a Tekken7.org private company is about to
In
launch
that
the most
silence,
powerful rocket ever built
planet
for what might be
breathes
its
a
final
stay.
test before a complete redesign. This is not science fiction. This is October 2025. If you're ready to dive deep into what's really happening above our heads right now, hit that like button and subscribe, because we're about to spend the next 2 hours unpacking the most extraordinary space news of our generation. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is there, and which of these stories shocks you most. And if you want to help our community grow, share this on X, Facebook, Reddit, or your favorite messenger. Thank you for always having our back. Let's begin with the asteroid that slipped through our defenses. Chapter 1, Close Encounter. The asteroid that snuck up on humanity. We have spent billions of dollars building a planetary defense system.
within,
Telescopes scattered across Earth
shadowed
scan the night
forms
sky
emerge to
continuously,
neigh.
cataloging every moving object, calculating trajectories, ensuring nothing dangerous approaches without warning. The system works remarkably well for large asteroids, the kind that could wipe out cities or even civilizations. We track those months or years in advance. But on October 1st, 2025, our entire detection network failed to spot something until it was already in our rearview mirror. Asteroid 2025. TF measures somewhere between 1.2 and 2.7 meters in diameter. Not exactly a planet killer, but roughly the size of a compact car. It was traveling at 20.9 kilometers per second. That's nearly 13,000 miles per hour. Fast. Enough to cross the United States in less than 4 minutes. At its closest approach, just after midnight UTC on October 1st, this rock passed 419 kilometers above Antarctica. To put that in perspective, the International Space Station orbits at around 420 kilometers. This asteroid flew through the same neighborhood where astronauts sleep. The Catalina Sky Survey in Arizona detected it at 2:35 inches the morning Eastern Time on October 1st using the BOK telescope. But here's what should keep you awake at night. That detection came at 6 hours and 36 minutes after the asteroid's closest approach. We didn't see it coming. We saw it leaving. Now, asteroid 2025 TF ranks as the second closest asteroid flyby ever recorded. The record holder, asteroid 2020 VT4, passed even closer back in November 2020, coming within 370 kilometers of Earth's surface. But that one we also detected after the fact. There's a pattern here, and it's not a comforting one. The issue isn't incompetence. The astronomers and engineers running these detection systems are among the best in the world. The problem is physics and resources. Small asteroids like 2025 TF are incredibly difficult to spot. They're dark, they're fast, and they don't reflect much sunlight. Our telescope networks are optimized to catch the big ones, the asteroids larger than 150 meters that would cause regional devastation. Those we track religiously, but objects in the 1 to 10 meters range, there are
Earth's
millions
telescopes
of them,
capture it
and they're nearly
and
invisible
recognize the
until they're
pattern.
practically on top of us. Here's where it gets more interesting. When asteroid 2025
It matches the ancient
TF was
carvings
finally
from
spotted,
Mars's crater.
Scientists had to work backwards to calculate its orbit. They determined it follows an elongated path around the Sun with a semi-major axis of 1.62 astronomical units. Its orbit brings it as close as 0. Liu, Qi, Liu, Qi, Liu. Astronomical units to the Sun at perihelion, and as far as 2.56 astronomical units at Aelion. The orbital period is roughly 2.06 years. The orbit is tilted about 9.1 degrees relative to the ecliptic plane, the flat disk where most planets orbit. But all of those numbers come with enormous uncertainty. The orbit is what astronomers... That means the calculations are based on just a one-day observation arc, a snapshot so brief that predicting where this asteroid will be in the future is more guesswork than science. Additional observations will be required to refine its trajectory and assess whether it might pose any threat during future encounters with Earth. Think about what an object passed closer to Earth than some of our satellites, and we have only the vaguest idea of where it came from or where it's going next. It could return. It could be on a collision course with Earth decades from now, or it might never come close again. We simply don't know. The uncomfortable truth is that asteroids this size hit Earth more often than most people realize. The Tunguska event in 1908, which flattened 830 square miles of Siberian forest, was likely caused by an object only 30 to 50 meters across. That larger than 2025 TF, but not by an overwhelming margin. If 2025 TF had been on a collision course instead of a flyby trajectory, it would have exploded in the atmosphere with the force of several kilotons of TNT. Not enough to end civilization, but certainly enough to devastate a city if it happened to detonate over one.
A new dawn rises. The
And we
first
wouldn't have
light
known it was
of the
coming
galactic
until
age.
it was too late. Scientists are calling this a wake-up call. The near miss has reignited discussions about improving our detection capabilities for smaller, near-Earth objects. Because if there's one thing this encounter has made clear, it's that our cosmic neighborhood is far busier and far more dangerous than our current systems can fully monitor. The question isn't whether another asteroid will surprise us. The question is when and whether we'll be lucky enough for it to miss again. But while we're worrying about rocks flying past Earth, something far more profound has been unfolding on the surface of Mars. Something that might answer one of humanity's oldest questions. Chapter 2. The Mars Breakthrough. Ancient life smoking gun. For over a year, a rock on Mars has been kept not because it's unusual in size or composition, but because of what's written on its surface, patterns that on Earth would be unmistakable signs of life. On September 10th, 2025, NASA made an announcement that sent ripples through the scientific community and beyond. The Perseverance rover's discovery of potential signatures in a sample called Sapphire Canyon has passed the most rigorous scientific scrutiny imaginable. Here, acting NASA Administrator Shah Duffy put it bluntly, this very well could be the clearest sign of life that we've ever found on Mars. Let's rewind to July 24th, 2024, when Perseverance drilled into an arrowhead-shaped rock nicknamed Chayava Falls in Mars's Jezero crater. The rover's instruments immediately detected something intriguing. The rock surface was covered in what scientists began calling leopard spots, small circular features with lighter centers surrounded by dark ring. These weren't just pretty patterns. They were chemical signatures that on Earth are often created by microbes consuming organic matter and producing specific minerals as waste products. The spots contain vivianite and greyheat, two minerals that form in low-temperature, water-rich environments. Vivianite is a hydrated iron phosphate often found near decaying organic matter and sediments. Grage is an iron sulfide that some forms of microbial life produce as a byproduct of their metabolism. Finding these minerals together, collocated with organic carbon, creates what geologists call a compelling potential biosignature. But here's where the story gets even more interesting. Chayava Falls sits in a geological formation called Bright Angel, located along the edges of Nurit Vales, an ancient river valley that once carried water into Jezero crater more than 3 billion. This valley measures roughly a divided by 4 mile wide, suggesting sustained, powerful water flow over long periods. The mudstones and layered sediments in Bright Angel tell the story of a dynamic environment where fast-flowing rivers alternated with periods of calm standing water. Exactly the kind of environment where rest here, on Earth, microbial life thrives. The discovery was particularly surprising because Bright Angel represents some of the youngest sedimentary rocks the Perseverance mission has investigated. Earlier hypotheses assumed that signs of ancient life would be confined to older rock formations, remnants of Mars's earliest, most habitable era. But finding these features in relatively younger rocks suggests that Mars might have remained habitable for a longer period than previously thought, or that life managed to persist later into the planet's history than we imagined. Now, before we get carried away, we need to talk about what a potential biosignature actually means. This is not proof of life. It's evidence that requires further investigation. As mission scientist Katie Stack Morgan emphasized, astrobiological claims, particularly those related to the potential discovery of past extraterrestrial life, require extraordinary evidence. The peer review process that led to publication in Nature was deliberately rigorous, with outside scientists spending an entire year scrutinizing the Mars 2020 team's data and analysis. They looked for alternative explanations, non-biological processes that could create the same pattern. And while they found some possibilities, none of them fit the evidence as well as the biological hypothesis. Here's what makes this discovery so powerful. The Perseverance rover used two sophisticated instruments to analyze Chayava Falls. SHERLOC, which stands for Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals, detected a strong spectral signature called the GAND, which indicates organic carbon. Pixel, the planetary
Light
instrument for
scatters
X-ray
like
lithochemistry, mapped the distribution
cosmic wind.
of chemical elements across the rock's surface with incredible precision. Together, these instruments revealed that the organic matter and the redox-sensitive minerals weren't just present. They were collocated in the same tiny spots, clustered together in a way that strongly suggests a connection. On Earth, this kind of collocation happens all the time in microbial environments. Bacteria consume organic compounds and release minerals as waste. The minerals precipitate out right where the microbes are living, creating distinctive patterns. The leopard spots on Chi Falls look remarkably similar to features found in ancient terrestrial rocks where we know microbial activity occurred. But there's a catch, and it's to truly confirm whether these features have a biological origin. Scientists need to bring the Sapphire Canyon sample back to Earth, where it can be analyzed with instruments far more sophisticated than anything we can send to Mars. Laboratories here can perform isotopic analysis, examine the molecular structure of the organic compounds, and conduct experiments that simply aren't possible with a rover's limited toolkit. This is where the political drama enters the story. The Mars Sample Return Mission, a joint effort between NASA and the European Space Agency, was designed to do exactly this: retrieve the samples that Perseverance has been carefully collecting and deliver them to terrestrial labs. But the mission has been plagued by budget overruns and schedule delays. President Trump's proposed budget for 2026 would cancel the current Mars Sample Return program entirely, zeroing out its funding. During the September press conference announcing the Chava Falls findings, Duffy suggested this wasn't an abandonment of the goal, but a strategic pivot toward finding a cheaper, faster option. Meanwhile, China has announced plans for its own Mars Sample Return mission, potentially launching as early as 2020. If the United States doesn't bring back Perseverance's samples, China might be the first to return Martian material to Earth, and they might be the ones to definitively answer whether life ever existed on Mars. The geopolitical implications are staggering. For now, the Sapphire Canyon sample sits safely tucked inside a sealed tube on the Martian surface, waiting. It contains what might be the most important scientific discovery in human frozen evidence that could rewrite our understanding of life's place in the universe. But while that sample waits, something else has been unfolding much closer to home, something that's forcing governments to confront questions they'd rather not answer. Chapter 3. UFO Mystery Deepens. Congress reveals shocking footage. On September 9th, 2025, Congressman Eric Burles from Missouri walked into a House Oversight Committee hearing and played a video that nobody in the public had seen before. The footage, dated October 30th, 2024, shows a bright, spherical object moving against a dark background. Then, suddenly, a Hellfire missile enters the frame. The missile strikes the object directly. What happens next defies everything we think we know about how missiles work. The object doesn't explode, it doesn't fragment, it doesn't even seem to slow down. The missile appears to bounce off and continue on its own trajectory while the orb keeps flying. That's the Hellfire missile smacking into that UFO and just bouncing right off, Burles said, commenting on the video. And it kept going. He paused, then asked the question that's been echoing through defense circles ever since. I'm not going to speculate what it is, but the question is, why are we being blocked from this information consistently? The video was captured by an MQ-9 Reaper drone operating off the coast of Yemen. At the time, the waters near Yemen were an active combat zone, with US Navy ships and aircraft protecting commercial shipping lanes from missiles and drones fired by Houthi militants. American forces were regularly shooting down threats in that region, but this object, whatever it was, didn't behave like a drone or a missile, and it certainly didn't respond to a Hellfire strike the way any known aircraft would. When asked to authenticate the video and provide details about when and where it was taken, the Department of Defense offered no comment. A defense official told reporters, "We do not have anything to provide on this." A DoD spokesperson added, "I have nothing for you. The stonewalling only deepened the mystery. But the Yemen video wasn't the only revelation at the hearing. Multiple military veterans testified under oath about their own encounter. The government's current term for what used to be called UFOs. Air Force veteran Dylan Boland described an incident from 2012 when he stepped outside for a cigarette break during an overnight shift at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. A triangular aircraft hovered above him for several minutes, silent and motionless. Then, according to Boland, the object rapidly ascended to commercial jet level and left the area at a high rate of speed. Boland reported the incident through official channels. He was interviewed by AARO, the Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, in 2023, but instead of being taken seriously, he claims his report was dismissed. Worse, he says he faced workplace retaliation, manipulation of his security clearance, and blacklisting from employment at federal intelligence agencies. His testimony painted a picture of a system that doesn't just fail to investigate UAP encounters. It actively punishes those who come forward. The hearing wasn't just about individual sightings. It was about transparency, or the lack of it. Representative Annapolina Luna, who chairs the task force, opened the session by saying, "For too long, the issue of unidentified anomalous protein phenomena, commonly known as UAPs, has been shrouded in secrecy, stigma, and in some cases, outright dismissal. This is about national security, government, accountability, and the American people's right to the truth. Here's what makes this moment different from decades of UFO speculation. The witnesses aren't fringe conspiracy theorists. They're military personnel with spotless records, security clearances, and first-hand operational experience. The footage isn't grainy. Cell phone video from its sensor data from advanced military platforms captured during active operations in contested airspace. And the resistance to disclosure isn't coming from shadowy cabals, is coming from official Pentagon offices that are supposed to be investigating these incidents. AR has maintained it has no verifiable evidence of extraterrestrial activity or technology. The agency uses what it calls a rigorous scientific framework and data-driven, but critics point out that many of the most compelling cases, including the Yemen incident, seem to get explained away using logic that doesn't quite add up. Take the infamous Go Fast video from 2015, which showed a fast-moving object appearing to fly at high speed above ocean waves off California. Error. Analysts eventually determined it was an optical illusion involving a weather balloon, claiming the apparent high speed was due to parallax and the angle from which the Navy F-18's camera viewed the object. But pilots who witnessed these objects in person, not just on sensors, insist the explanations don't match their experiences. Some analysts have suggested the Yemen orb might also be a balloon drifting in high-altitude winds and reflecting sunlight. The theory is that it only appeared to be moving rapidly because of parallax motion as the drone's camera tracked it. And the missile, perhaps it simply missed and the angle of the footage made it look like a direct hit. But former senior intelligence official Luwu Elizondo, who testified at the hearing, pushed back hard on that explanation. "We've never seen a Hellfire missile hit a target and bounce off." He said, "When a Hellfire makes a kinetic strike on something solid, there's usually not much left of whatever it is it's hitting. It's very, very destructive." So, what are we left with? Either the US military encountered something with technology far beyond our current capabilities, technology that can withstand a direct missile strike and continue operating.
The energy readings from that
sector
sector are
explanation
unusual.
that officials are refusing to share publicly, for neither option is particularly comforting. And this isn't an isolated incident. The National UFO Reporting Center logged over 2,000 UAP sightings in just the first 6 months of 2025, a significant increase from previous years. The Pentagon has received more than 750 new reports between May 2023 and June 2024 alone. Whatever is happening in our skies is happening more frequently, and more people are paying attention. While governments grapple with objects in the atmosphere they can't explain, something far more predictable but no less dramatic has been unfolding above our heads, driven by the star that makes all life on Earth possible. Chapter 4. Solar Fury, the Sun's Last Gasp. In October 2024, scientists made an announcement that should have dominated headlines, but somehow got lost in the noise of daily life. The Sun has reached solar maximum, the peak of its 11-year activity cycle. For most people, that sounds like dry astronomy, the kind of thing that matters to researchers but doesn't affect everyday existence. But what's happening to our star right now is anything but academic, and the most intense effects might still be ahead of us. Here's the thing about solar maximum that nobody tells you. The peak of solar activity doesn't mean the end. It means we're entering a phase that could actually produce more geomagnetic storms and more spectacular auroras than the maximum itself. Think of it like a firework that burns brightest, not at ignition, but during its final explosive moments before fading. The Sun is about to give us its last gasp, and that gasp could light up skies across the planet for the next 2 years. Solar physicist Pally from the Norwegian. It's good news for aurora chasers, as peak auroral activity occurs a few years after solar maximum. Thus, we should have several years still with very high aurora activity. Let that sink in for the moment. We're not at the end of the show, we're approaching the grand finale. To understand why, we need to talk about what drives auroras in the first place. During solar maximum, the Sun's surface becomes covered with sunspots, regions of intense magnetic activity where the star's magnetic field lines become tangled and stressed. When these field lines snap and reconnect, they release enormous amounts of energy in the form of solar flares and coronal mass ejections. A single CME can hurl billions of tons of plasma into space at speeds exceeding 1,000,000 miles an hour. When that plasma slams into Earth's magnetic field, it triggers geomagnetic storms that funnel charged particles toward the poles where they collide with atoms in our atmosphere and create the shimmering curtains of light we call auroras. But here's where the story gets more interesting. After solar maximum, the number of explosive flares and CMEs starts to decline. You'd think that would mean fewer auroras, but you'd be wrong. Because during the declining phase of the solar cycle, something else happens. Long-lived coronal holes begin to form, dark regions in the Sun's atmosphere where magnetic field lines open up into space, allowing streams of fast-moving solar wind to escape continuously. These high-speed streams can persist for weeks or even months, battering Earth's magnetic field with sustained pressure that triggers geomagnetic storms just as dramatic as those caused by CMEs. Solar physicist Sharskoff explained it this way. During the declining phase, we actually have more geomagnetic storms. Maybe the Sun's actual eruption activity slows down a bit after you peak through solar max, but because you still have coronal holes forming and you still have quite a few eruptions, when you add those together, you get more frequent and sometimes more intense auroral displays. We're already seeing in early October 2025, Earth experienced 5 consecutive days of geomagnetic activity driven by a fast solar wind stream from a coronal hole. Solar wind speeds reached 768 kilometers per second before gradually declining to 608 kilometers per second. Even at those reduced speeds, the wind was strong enough to trigger isolated G1 or minor geomagnetic storm levels. Auroras danced across northern latitudes, visible as far south as New York. Photographers in Iceland, Norway, Canada, and the northern United States captured stunning images of green, pink, and purple lights rippling across the sky. And this was just a warm-up. A small, coronal mass ejection launched by an M1 of 5 class solar flare in early October is expected to arrive around October 8th, potentially bringing another round of disturbances. Scientists are forecasting that the current solar cycle, cycle 25, could maintain high levels of geomagnetic activity well into 2027 or beyond, driven by this combination of lingering eruptions and persistent coronal holes. But there's another factor at play, one that has nothing to do with the Sun itself. Earth's orientation during equinox season, which we're still experiencing in early October, makes our planet more susceptible to geomagnetic. During equinoxes, the angle of Earth's magnetic field relative to the incoming solar wind creates conditions that allow more particles to penetrate our defenses and trigger stronger auroral displays. It's like opening a door that's usually half closed. The practical implications of all this solar activity go beyond pretty lights. Geomagnetic storms can disrupt radio communications, interfere with GPS systems, cause satellite orbits to decay, and in extreme cases, during the Great Geomagnetic Storm of March 1989, caused by a powerful CME, the entire province of Quebec lost power for 9 hours. Transformers overheated, circuit breakers tripped, and millions of people were left in the dark. That storm reached G5 or extreme levels on the geomagnetic storm scale. The storms we're seeing now have mostly been G1 to G3, moderate by comparison, but still strong enough to cause headaches for satellite operators and airline pilots flying polar routes. Scientists use something called the KP index to measure geomagnetic activity on a scale from 0 to 9. A KP of 5 or higher indicates storm conditions. During the first week of October 2025, the KP index fluctuated between 3 and 5 with brief spikes into storm territory. Forecasters predict this pattern will continue with frequent, unsettled to active conditions punctuated by. For those of us who aren't operating satellites or managing power grids, the main effect of this solar fury is simply beauty. Auroras are among the most spectacular natural phenomena on Earth, and the next 2 years might offer some of the best viewing opportunities in decades. If you live at high latitudes, above 50 degrees north or south, you'll have regular chances to see the lights. But even people at mid-latitudes down to 40 degrees or so might catch glimpses during stronger storms. The sun's last gasp is turning out to be a light show for the ages. But while the sun paints our skies with fire, other celestial visitors are approaching from the depths of space, and they're bringing their own brand of spectacle. Chapter 5. Comet Chaos, 3 green visitors light. Up October skies. Something strange is happening in October 2025. Look up on the right night from the right location, and you might see not 1, not 2, but 3 comets visible simultaneously. All of them are green. All of them were discovered just this year, and one of them might become bright enough to see with your naked eye. A rare gift in an era when most comets remain frustratingly dim. The star of this cosmic show is Comet C 2025A6, better known as Comet Lemon, named after the Mount Lemmon Observatory in Arizona, where it was first spotted on January 3rd, 2025. At the time of discovery, it was magnitude 21. Woo! So faint that astronomers initially thought it might be an asteroid. It wasn't until follow-up observations revealed a condensed coma and a short tail that its true nature became clear. For most of the year, Lemon remained an obscure object, tracked by professional astronomers, but largely ignored by the public. Early predictions suggested it would peak around magnitude 9 near perihelion in early November, bright enough for backyard telescopes, but nowhere near naked eye visibility. Then something unexpected happened. In mid-August, after emerging from solar conjunction, when the comet was hidden in the sun's glare, observers noticed it was significantly brighter than predicted. By August 19th, its magnitude had jumped to 11. A short, spiky tail became visible, and the brightening didn't stop. By late September, Comet Lemon had reached magnitude 8 to 9, easily visible with binoculars and small telescopes. Astrophotographers began capturing stunning images showing not just the bright nucleus and surrounding coma, but a long, active ion tail streaming away from the sun, complete with twirls and knots as the tail interacted with the solar wind. On September 30th, the comet had brightened to magnitude 6.6, with an iron tail stretching about 3 degrees across the sky and a dust tail becoming visible as well. Current projections, updated almost daily as new observations come in, suggest Comet Lemon will reach magnitude 4, possibly even magnitude 3, when it makes its closest approach to Earth on October 21st at a distance of 56 million miles. That puts it right on the edge of naked eye visibility. From dark sky sites far from city lights, people might actually be able to spot it as a faint, fuzzy star. And unlike many comets that peak when they're too close to the sun, to observe safely, Lemon will be well positioned in the evening sky about 42 degrees from the sun, visible in the west about an hour after sunset. The comet will continue to brighten after closest approach as it heads toward perihelion, its closest point to the sun on November 8th. The best viewing is expected around Halloween and into early November, when Lemon will pass through the constellation of Fucus. For Northern Hemisphere observers, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Comet Lemon follows an extremely elongated orbit and may not return for 1,350 years, if it returns at all. But Lemon isn't alone. Comet C2025 R2 Swan was discovered just weeks ago, literally one day before reaching its closest point to the Sunday. We didn't see it sooner because the sun's glare hid it from ground-based telescopes. It was actually spotted by sharp-eyed amateur astronomers Vladimir Bezugi and Michael Matiazzo in images taken by the Swan instrument aboard NASA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, a space-based telescope designed to study the sun, hence the name Swan. This comet won't get much brighter as it's now moving away from the sun, but it will get easier to see as it puts more distance between itself and the sun's glare from our perspective. On October 20th, it will make its closest approach to Earth at a distance of 24 million miles. Spectacular photographs have already captured its tail stretching past the star speaker. This weekend, it will pass within a degree of Mars, creating a beautiful photo opportunity for astrophotographers who can frame both objects together. The third member of this cosmic trio is Comet C2025, K18 Atlas, named after the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system. A survey designed to find near-Earth asteroids, but clever enough to spot comets too. K18 less is fainter than the other two, but it's getting brighter as it approaches the Sunday. It will be best visible before dawn in the coming weeks for patient observers with binoculars or small telescopes. Why are all three comets green? The color comes from diatomic carbon, molecules made of two carbon atoms bonded together which absorbs sunlight and remitted at a wavelength that appears green to human eyes. As comets approach the sun, solar radiation breaks apart larger organic molecules in their icy cores, releasing diatomic carbon into the coma. The closer they get, the more carbon gets released and the greener they glow. Interestingly, there's a fourth green comet currently visible, though it's much harder to spot. The Interstellar Visitor 3 Atlas, only the third comet from beyond our solar system ever detected, recently abandoned its crimson hue and turned emerald as it interacts with the sun's radiation in ways we're still trying to understand. But that's a story we'll return to shortly. Comet Lemon has already exceeded all expectations, and there's genuine excitement among astronomers about how bright it might become. Nick James, director of the Comet section of the British Astronomical Association, told spaceweather.com, "This comet is developing very nicely, and it is already an impressive object, well placed for observation in the morning sky. It is definitely worth getting up for. The unpredictability is part of what makes comets so captivating. They're not like planets or stars, following predictable paths and maintaining steady brightness. Comets are wild, erratic, sometimes disappointing, occasionally spectacular. They can brighten in sudden outbursts, fragment without warning, or fizzle into obscurity just when they were supposed to put on a show. Predicting a comet's behavior is like predicting the weather 6 months in advance. You can make educated guesses based on physics and past behavior, but nature always reserves the right to surprise you. And surprises are exactly what we're getting in October 2025. 3 green comets racing through our skies at once. One potentially visible to the naked eye. The sun blazing with activity. Auroras dancing at mid-latitudes. Asteroids sneaking past our defenses. And on Mars, a rock covered in patterns that might be fossils of ancient life. But while all this cosmic drama unfolds naturally, one company is preparing to launch the most powerful rocket ever built. A machine that could either revolutionize space travel become another footnote in the long history of ambitious failures. Chapter 6. Starship's Final Act. SpaceX's make or break moment. October 13th, 2025. Mark that date. If all goes according to plan, and with SpaceX, that's never a guarantee, the world will witness the 11th test flight of Starship, the tallest and most powerful rocket ever built. But this isn't just another launch. Flight 11 will be the last time we see Starship version 2 fly. Everything after this will be bigger, more powerful, and theoretically more reliable. The question is whether version 2 can go out on a high note, or whether it will add one more explosion to a year that's already seen far too many. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. 2025 has not been kind to Starship. The year started with back-to-back explosive failures that shook confidence in the entire program. Flight 7 inches January saw the upper stage, known as Ship, experience a catastrophic breakup during its initial burn.
Strange magnetic readings spread worldwide.
Shut down prematurely, causing loss of attitude control and total loss of telemetry. The vehicle's breakup was visible from Florida, Jamaica, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. Flight 8 inches March appeared successful at first. The Super Heavy booster was caught by the launch tower's mechanical arms, a stunning achievement. But Ship 34 suffered 4 engine shutdowns during its burn, lost control, and broke apart 9.5 minutes after liftoff. Then came Flight 9 inches May, which used the program's first reused Super Heavy booster, another milestone. But again, the upper stage failed to complete its mission. 3 failures in a row, 3 ships lost, 3 investigations, 3 rounds of redesigns and promises that next time would be different. Flight 10 inches August finally broke the losing streak. Everything worked. The booster splashed down as planned. The ship completed its suborbital arc, re-entered the atmosphere with its heat shield intact, and made a controlled water landing in the Indian Ocean. It even managed to deploy Starlink satellites during flight, a critical capability demonstration. For the first time in months, SpaceX and its supporters could exhale. Now comes Flight 11, scheduled for 6:15 p.m. Central Time on October 13th, launching from Starbase in South Texas. The mission profile looks similar to Flight 10, but with some key differences that make it more ambitious and potentially more risky. The booster being used, designated B-15, previously flew on Flight 8 back in March. It was successfully caught by the tower during that mission, making it flight-proven hardware. This time, it's equipped with 24 flight-proven Raptor engines, meaning both the booster and most of its engines have already been through the stresses of launch and landing. But here's the twist. Instead of attempting another tower catch, B-15 will perform a unique landing burn engine configuration that SpaceX plans to use on the next generation
They shimmer
Super
like
Heavy
emerald
version 3.
fireflies.
The booster will ignite 13 engines at the start of its landing burn, then transition to a new configuration with 5 engines running during what's called the divert phase. Previously, this phase used only 3 engines. The new 5-engine approach adds redundancy in case of spontaneous engine shutdowns, a problem that's plagued several flights. Finally, the booster will transition to its 3 center engines for the end of the landing burn, entering a full hover above the Gulf of Mexico
Observe.
before shutting down and dropping
not
into
fear.
the water. SpaceX is calling this a stress test. They want to measure
Observe.
real-world vehicle
Do not
dynamics
fear.
as the engines shut down and restart during the different phases of the burn. If it works, it validates the approach
We
for
are
version
running
3.
out of time.
If it fails,
I am
well,
on it.
at least it fails over water instead of near the launch site.
Prepare all
The upper
systems
stage
for
Ship
immediate
38
deployment.
has its own ambitious agenda. It will deploy 8 Starlink simulators, mock-ups similar in size and mass to the next generation Starlink satellite SpaceX plans to launch commercially. These simulators won't actually operate as satellites. They're on the same suborbital trajectory as Starship and will burn up on re-entry. But deploying them tests the mechanisms and procedures needed for real missions. Ship 38 will also attempt to relight one of its Raptor engines while in space, demonstrating the ability to perform maneuvers beyond simple coasting. This capability is essential for future missions to the Moon, Mars, or anywhere else that requires precise orbital changes. Then comes the heat shield test.
Its surface glows like liquid
this is where
metal.
things get deliberately dangerous. Engineers have removed tiles from several areas of Ship 38 to intentionally stress test vulnerable spots across the vehicle. Some of the missing tiles are in areas that don't have a backup ablative layer underneath. If the plasma from re-entry finds its way through those gaps, it could burn through the structure and cause catastrophic failure. But SpaceX needs to know exactly where the weak points are and how much punishment the ship can take before it fails. The only way to find out is to push it until something breaks. Assuming Ship 38 survives re-entry, it will perform a dynamic banking maneuver during its final descent, testing subsonic guidance algorithms that will be needed for future flights returning to the launch site. Then comes a landing burn and splashdown in the Indian Ocean, hopefully in one piece. All of this is building toward version 3, the Starship iteration that SpaceX believes will finally make the system operational. Version 3 ships will be larger with more propellant capacity and greater payload volume. The boosters will use more engines and generate even more thrust. Most importantly, the design incorporates lessons learned from 10 previous test flights and countless failures, explosions, and close calls. But none of that matters if Flight 11 goes sideways.
Into orbit.
If Ship 38 breaks up during the heat shield stress test, critics will point to it as evidence that Starship is fundamentally flawed. If the booster's new landing burn configuration fails, it raises questions about whether the approach is viable at all. And if anything goes wrong in a spectacular public way, it could impact SpaceX's relationship with NASA, which is counting on Starship to land astronauts on the Moon during the Artemis 3 mission in 2027.
The fragments
The stakes
arrange
couldn't
into
be higher.
perfect circles.
Starship isn't just a rocket, it's the centerpiece of SpaceX's vision for the future of spaceflight. It's supposed to make access to orbit cheap and routine. It's supposed to enable Mars colonization. It's supposed to revolutionize satellite deployment, refuel itself in orbit, and eventually carry humans beyond Earth on journeys that currently exist only in science fiction. But first, it has to stop exploding. Flight 11 is SpaceX's chance to prove that version 2 can end its run on a successful note, building momentum toward the version 3 era. The launch window opens on October 13th. Millions will be watching, and in the silence before ignition, everyone will be thinking the same thing. Please don't blow up. While SpaceX races to perfect its giant rocket, another nation is executing a mission that's already billions of miles from Earth, heading toward a target that might hold secrets about our own moon's violent past. Chapter 7: China's Moon Mystery, Tianwen. Dua's Daring Mission. On May 20th, 2020 Lima, at 1:31 a.m. local time in China, a long March 3 B rocket climbed into the night sky above Xi'an Satellite Launch Center in Sichuan Province. Most of the world barely noticed, but what that rocket carried into space might answer one of the strangest mysteries in our cosmic neighborhood. Is there a piece of the Moon floating in orbit around Earth, pretending to be an asteroid? The spacecraft is called Tianwen 2, the second mission in China's planetary exploration program. Tianwen 1 went to Mars, delivering an orbiter and a rover that are still operating today. Tianwen 3 will attempt to bring samples back from Mars, potentially beating NASA's troubled Mars sample return program. Tianwen 4 will visit Jupiter and Uranus in a single mission. But Tianwen 2 has a target that's much closer and far more mysterious, an object called Comet, also known as Asteroid 2016 Ho3. Comet Alia is what astronomers call a quasi-satellite, a near-Earth object that appears to orbit our planet, even though it's actually orbiting the Sunday. Its orbit is synchronized with Earth's in such a way that from our perspective, it looks like it's dancing around us, never straying too far, never getting pulled away. The asteroid measures between 40 and 100 meters across, roughly the size of a Ferris wheel. It completes one orbit around the Sun every 365 days, almost exactly matching Earth's own year. And It's been doing this peculiar dance for at least a century, possibly much longer. But here's what makes Camo Alea
It
truly
turns
strange.
toward the camera,
Its
watching
spectrum,
us.
the way it reflects sunlight, closely resembles weathered lunar rocks. In 2021, astronomer Ben Shai led a study suggesting that this asteroid might actually be a massive boulder ejected from the moon by an ancient impact. The name Kamoa comes from a Hawaiian creation chant that alludes to an offspring traveling on its
It's
own.
the size of an
A
entire
poetic
solar
description
system.
of a moon fragment wandering through space while staying near its parent. If this theory is correct, Kamoa could tell us about the moon's bombardment history, the size and energy of impacts that have shaped the lunar surface,
Its
and even
movement
provide
bends
pristine
light,
samples of lunar material that
forming
haven't been
halos
contaminated
of color.
by Earth's environment. But there's another possibility. Kamasu Isu Ale
Its
might instead
movement
be a main
bends
belt
light,
asteroid
forming
that
halos
somehow
of color.
migrated into a semi-captured orbit near Earth through gravitational interactions we don't fully understand. That would be equally fascinating, revealing migration, pathways through the solar system that current models don't predict. The only way to know for sure is to go there and collect samples. That's exactly what Tianwen 2 is designed to do. On June 6th, just over a week after launch, the China National Space Administration released the mission's first update. The spacecraft was operating normally and had traveled more than 3 million km from Earth. A photo showed one of
lands
Tianwen
softly
2's
on a
solar
quiet
arrays,
planet covered in
photographed by an
oceans.
engineering camera, floating against the black of space. The image was simple, almost
lands
mundane,
softly
but it
on a quiet
confirmed the
planet
spacecraft was
covered in
alive and
oceans.
healthy. Tianwen 2 is now on a year-long journey to Camo Alawa. When it arrives in 2026, it will spend another year orbiting the tiny asteroid, studying it from close range, mapping its shape and surface, measuring its mass and composition. This will be extraordinarily difficult. Kamoa Olea is the smallest asteroid ever targeted by a space mission, and it rotates once every 28 minutes, making it the fastest rotator ever visited by a spacecraft. Landing on something that small and spinning that fast is like trying to grab
From
a
orbit,
merry-go-round while
It
blindfolded.
looks like a fractal city
China
beneath
plans
the
to
sea.
use 3 different sampling techniques. The
From
first
orbit,
is a
it
hovering
looks like a
approach,
fractal
where the
city
lander
beneath
matches
the sea.
rotation with the asteroid while collecting material. The second is a touch-and-go maneuver, similar to what NASA's OSIRIS-REx and Japan's Booster 2 missions used successfully. The spacecraft briefly makes contact with the surface, grabs a sample, and immediately lifts off. The third most ambitious approach involves using drills on the lander's legs to anchor the spacecraft to the asteroid's surface, allowing for more controlled, longer duration sampling. The goal is to collect at least 100 grams of material, a little more than 3.0. That might not sound like much, but when you're sampling an asteroid 40 million miles from
It's
Earth
alive and
with a
intelligent.
robotic spacecraft, operating
They realize
autonomously
life.
because of communication
It's
delays,
alive
every
and
gram is
intelligent.
precious. Once the samples are secured, Tianwen 2 will begin the journey home. In 2028, about 2.5 years after launch, it will approach Earth and release a re-entry capsule containing the asteroid samples. That capsule will have to survive entry speeds of 1 kilometer per second, faster than anything
Communication
returning from the
established.
moon,
Light
generating
for
temperatures and
language.
pressures that will push Chinese heat shield technology to its limits. But here's where the mission gets
Communication
even more
established.
ambitious. After
Light
releasing
for
the sample
language.
capsule, Tianwen 2 won't retire. Instead, it will use Earth
The
for a
ocean reveals
gravitational
its origin,
slingshot, flinging
seeded
itself
by
into
the
a
meteor.
transfer orbit toward a completely different target. Main belt comet, 311 P-Pan stars. The journey will take about 7 years. If everything works, Tianwen 2 will arrive at the comet in the mid-2030 seconds, orbit it, and conduct remote, sensing studies of this strange hybrid object that has characteristics of both asteroids and comets. The entire mission is designed to last a decade. 1 spacecraft, 2 completely different targets. Sample return from a quasi-satellite, then a rendezvous with a main belt comet. It's audacious, complex, and if successful, will demonstrate capabilities that only a handful of nations possess. More importantly, it's a direct challenge to American space dominance.
Earth receives
While
faint
NASA
echoes
struggles
of that
with budget
same
cuts,
signal
workforce
decades later.
reductions, and political interference.
Earth
China is
receives
executing
faint
a
echoes
carefully
of that
planned,
same signal
well-funded
decades
program
later.
of robotic exploration that's advancing
It
steadily
matches the
toward
three
ever more
eye
ambitious
/
goals.
atlas patterns.
Tianwen 2 launched on schedule.
Okay.
It's operating normally, and in 2028,
The data
it might
matches.
deliver the first samples
It
from
matches the
Kamoa-Lewa
three eye
to
/
laboratories
atlas
on Earth.
patterns.
If those samples confirm the asteroid is a lunar fragment, China will have answered a major scientific question and demonstrated its technical prowess in deep space operations. If NASA's Mars sample return program continues to languish while China brings rocks back from both an asteroid and eventually Mars, the symbolic implications will be impossible to ignore. The space race isn't over. It's just entering a new phase, one where the finish line keeps moving and the competitors are running very different races. China is playing the long game, methodically building capabilities, launching missions, collecting data, and proving that patient sustained investment in space exploration pays dividends.
Astronomers have confirmed
Right now,
that these
Tianwen
distant
2
stars
is
are
millions of
actually
km away
pulsing.
and getting farther every day, riding on sunlight and iron, thrust
Astronomers
toward a target
confirm
most people have
distant
never heard
stars
of.
are
But when it
pulsing
arrives,
back.
when it collects its samples, when those samples come home, the world will pay attention, because at that moment, another nation will have done something only the United States, Japan, and now China can claim, successfully returned material from beyond the moon. But while China steadily advances its space program with clear goals and stable funding, the American Space Agency that once put humans on the moon is facing an existential crisis that threatens to undo decades of achievement and erase missions that have already launched. Chapter 8: NASA in Crisis, Shutdown, Layoffs, and the Fight for Science. At 12:01 a.m. on October 1st, 2025, the United States federal government officially shut down. Within hours, 15,000 NASA employees received furlough notices and were sent home. Labs went quiet, offices closed, ongoing research ground to a halt. For most of the agency, work stopped entirely, but not for everyone. A small fraction of NASA's workforce, just over 3,000 people, were classified as essential and required to keep working. They won't receive paychecks during the shutdown. They'll log their hours and hope for back pay when the government reopens, but they have to show up because the work they do literally keeps spacecraft alive. Mission control operations for the International Space Station continued uninterrupted. Ground controllers still monitor life support systems, prepare and validate commands, and respond to emergencies. About 1,000 commands per day flow from
Within
Earth
it,
to the ISS
colossal
to maintain
shapes
operations
move without.
and keep the crew safe. If those controllers
Within
were
it,
furled,
colossal
astronauts' lives
shapes
would be at
move
risk,
across
so they work unpaid
ancient,
while Congress
gentle
argues over
beings.
budgets. The other major exception to the shutdown is the Artemis program, NASA's effort to return humans to the moon. Acting Administrator Shah Duffy made the AY's priorities crystal clear in a social media post before the shutdown. China is not going to the moon with good intentions. The implication was obvious. Beating China to the lunar surface is considered a national security imperative, important enough to exempt thousands of workers and contractors from furlough. This includes employees working on Artemis 2, the crewed test flight around the moon scheduled for as soon as February 2026, and Artemis 3, the actual moon landing mission planned for mid-2027. It also includes contractors at SpaceX and Blue Origin who are developing lunar landers and other hardware for the program. Those contractors were told to keep working through the shutdown, logging their time without immediate payment because Artemis cannot be allowed to slip further behind schedule. But here's what the shutdown doesn't tell you. The crisis at NASA began long before October 1st. Earlier in 2025, the Office of Management and Budget and acting NASA administrators issued directives to slash the AY's workforce by more than 4,000 employees. From the end of September through January 9th, 2026, thousands of longtime NASA employees are leaving through deferred resignation offers. These aren't furloughs, these are permanent departures. Over 20% of NASA's workforce gone. And it's not just numbers. These resignations have included top-tier talent, engineers who worked on Artemis, systems scientists who manage planetary missions, experts in fields like power, systems, propulsion, and life support. One NASA employee at Johnson Space Center in Houston, speaking anonymously, said the agency has lost at least one of its foremost experts in power systems, a critical loss for developing the nuclear reactor needed to generate power on the moon.